the BGF of All Time, that means Black Guerrilla Family. If I should break my stride or falter at my comrade's side, this oath shall kill me. If my words should prove untrue, should I betray the chosen few, this oath shall kill me. Should I submit to greed or lust, should I betray the people's trust, this oath shall kill me. Should I grow lax in discipline, in time of strife refuse my hand, this oath shall kill me. Should I fear any man or be slow to take a stand, this oath shall kill me. Long live the spirit of George Lester Jackson and the guerrillas of Black August.
Greetings and salutations. I'm your host, Gabe Morales. Today, after a careful review, I came up with a list of 10 individuals who I consider to be the most influential people in the history of the Black Guerrilla Family. Topping my list is George Jackson, who was the leader of the Revolutionary Armed Movement as a Black study group in late 1964. By 1966, it was called the Black Family in order to gather more support from Black nationalist convicts. This was before any formal Black guerrilla family. So when some people say there was no BGF until the early 1970s, in a way they're right, but that also can be viewed as being incorrect. After Jackson died in 1972, the Black family was renamed the Black Guerrilla Family in his honor to pay respect to his writings and beliefs that they should act as Maoist guerrillas against the U.S. government in order to bring it down. In his younger years, Jackson grew up in the Throop Street projects of Chicago. Jackson had his first arrest in Chicago for stealing a purse when he was only 14 years old. The family decided to move out to the greater Los Angeles area, and Jackson joined a local street gang called the Al Capones. Jackson soon got arrested as a youth and was locked up at the Paso Robles, California Youth Authority facility for breaking into Gold's department store, located in South Central LA. He also attempted a hijack in 1957 when he was only 15 years old. When the police showed up, Jackson claims that he assaulted an officer who replied, "Oh, get this wild nigger off me." Jackson claims that the cop shot at him 6 times point blank while he was standing with his hands up in the air. He stated that one bullet passed through his forearm while another went into his leg. Jackson stated that he felt the officers trying to murder him and that he had 2 comrades with him on that job, but they both got away because of the exchange between the pigs and him. In 1959, soon after his release from Paso Robles, he did a robbery in Bakersfield, California. Then he escaped from the Kern County Juvenile Facility by impersonating another youth and committed another robbery of a gas station for just over $70. He was caught again and sentenced under the old indeterminate sentencing law, receiving 1 year to life in prison in 1960. Jackson felt the law was very unfair, and he racked up many disciplinary problems that landed him in the hole. In the 1960s, Jackson ran with fellow convict James Carr in a prison gang called the Wolf Pack. Carr later had a falling out with the Black Panthers over egotistical individuals like Huey Newton. Carr actually served as Newton's bodyguard for a while, but became very disillusioned with what he saw at Black Panther headquarters. George Jackson failed the parole board for the 8th time in 1968. George Jackson also communicated with Huey Newton and other Black Panthers, as well as other leftist organizations. And this is the Black Panther connection that many people confuse. But Jackson was not a former Panther. He was incarcerated long before the Panthers even existed out on the streets. He did become a revolutionary in prison and wrote several books, including Soledad Brother, The Prison Letters of George Jackson, and Blood in My Eye. As he became more and more radicalized, Jackson merged with James Bones Johnson's group called the Black United Movement, as well as W.L. Nolan's group, the Black Vanguard, that would become known as the Black Guerrilla Family. While Jackson compared Huey Newton to Mao in his book, in private, he viewed him as having lumpen element tendencies, who used drugs and women, betrayed the revolution, and especially to his brother Jonathan Jackson, who I will describe here shortly. He did hold the highest respect for revolutionary and future professor Angela Davis, and many state that he actually considered Angela to be his girlfriend. Regardless, when George Jackson was killed, he was given full honors by the Black Panther Party for public relations. As fate would have it, Huey Newton was killed almost exactly 17 years after Jackson's death in August 1989 by a young black man in Oakland, California, affiliated with the 415 mob, also called Kumi, which was associated with the BGF. 3 days after a Soledad incident whereby 3 black prisoners were killed by a guard, Soledad Corrections Officer John Mills was hurled to his death from a tier. The Soledad brothers were inmates accused of being accomplices in his murder: George Jackson, Fleta Drumgo, and John Cletchett, who maintained his innocence even a few years ago when he was still locked up in prison. All 3 were charged for murdering Mills in retaliation for the murder of three black convicts killed earlier by prison staff. All 3 individuals were moved to the San Quentin Isolation Center, also known as the Adjustment Center, or AC, in the summer of 1970. George Lester Jackson was killed during a bloody escape attempt from San Quentin's Adjustment Center in August 1971, and he is considered a revolutionary icon to this very day. W.L. Nolan, actually shown here in his mugshot as W.D. Nolan, was the leader of the Black Vanguard. While at Soledad Prison, Nolan initiated a class action lawsuit on human rights violations. This is described in 1969 as W.L. Nolan versus Cletus Fitzharris, a CDC superintendent. Nolan charged Fitzharris and prison guards with knowingly exasperating existing social and racial conflict through direct harassment in ways not actionable in court, including filing false CDC 115 disciplinary reports and leaving black inmate cells unlocked in order for assaults to be committed by white convicts, in particular members of the Aryan Brotherhood. On January 14, 1970, 3 convicts, including W.L. Nolan, were shot to death by guard O.G. Miller, located in Soledad, California. Many years after his death, the BGF started the W.L. Nolan Mentorship Program that was a community-based pen pal service for members of the New African Black Revolutionary Party, also known as the New African Black Liberation Movement, which CDC considered a front group for the BGF. They also had a group called the New African Revolutionary Nationalism, or NARN. It was another group considered to be actually made up of BGF. While there's not a lot documented on W.L. Nolan, he is still held up in high regard by the Black Guerrilla Family and their supporters. Jonathan Jackson was the little brother of George Jackson. They were very close. In fact, George often referred to his brother as his alter ego. And in return, Jonathan wrote, "People have said that I am obsessed with my brother's case and the movement in general. A person that was close to me once said that my life was too wrapped up in my brother's case and that I wasn't cheerful enough for her. It's true, I don't laugh very much anymore. But I have one question, people, and people that think like you do. What would you do if it was your brother?" As Jonathan Jackson communicated more with George and read George's writings, he became more revolutionary. And on August 7th, 1970, Jonathan Jackson burst into the Marin County Courthouse in a bid to free BGF inmates on trial and take hostages in exchange for his brother George. With court hostages in tow at gunpoint, as seen here, the inmates made their way to a rented yellow Hertz van and were about to pull out of the parking lot when Marin County law enforcement officers and San Quentin guards opened fire. It just so happens that the San Quentin officers were out at the range nearby when they heard about the incident. When the shooting stopped, Judge Harold Haley had been executed by shotgun blast, and Jonathan Jackson, inmates Christmas, and McLean all lay dead in the van. Rochelle Cinque McGee was unconscious and seriously wounded. McGee was alive years later at Pelican Bay State Prison, then moved to Vacaville, where he was housed in 2020. Marin County Deputy Prosecutor Thomas was also seriously wounded but lived. Now, I researched a lot about this incident, and it is clear to me that the BGF expected assistance from the Black Panther Party, in particular Huey Newton, much more than they received, which caused a rift from that point on. As after Jonathan and other BGF's failed escape attempt and deaths, George Jackson became enraged and sought revenge and formed the August 7th movement. Both Jonathan and George Jackson are considered martyrs by the BGF and many on the far left. Hugo Pinell was a black inmate who was born in Nicaragua and sent to prison for a sex offense. Now, normally the BGF and prison gangs frown on sex offenders, but they would take in some as long as it wasn't a sex charge against a little child. Hugo Yogi Bear Pinell was accused of killing Officer R.J. McCarthy in 1971 at Soledad Prison, and afterwards was shipped to the San Quentin's Adjustment Center. After George Jackson's escape and death, investigators showed that Pinell was involved as one of the main attackers against staff, and he was kept in isolation for many years. Pinell was also well known for trying to attack staff in other incidents, and was even found with a homemade gun when he was at Folsom Prison. He also had issues fighting with and disrespecting the Aryan Brotherhood. Former Aryan Brotherhood Michael Thompson claims to have engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Pinell when he was housed at Folsom 4A. Pinell had been a thorn in the side of the brand since the 1960s. On August 12, 2015, on the new Folsom exercise yard, now called California State Prison at Sacramento County, a 71-year-old Yogi Pinell was shanked to death. The attack was conducted by AB associates Jason Beaver Weaver and Waylon Pitchford, and immediately sparked a riot involving about 70 inmates out of roughly 100 inmates who were in the exercise yard. 11 prisoners were sent to outside hospital, 5 of them being stabbed, according to corrections officials. Even though Pinell had some detractors from within the BGF, he also respected for all the work he put in his homicides of CDC staff. And he was considered to be a BGF lieutenant by the California Department of Corrections. Jeffrey Khatari Gaulden was a black radical in prison since 1967 for assault with a deadly weapon. 1 month after George Jackson was killed in 1971, Gaulden killed correctional staff member Robert Turner and became one of the recognized leaders of the BGF. He was very close to Hugo Pinell, as shown in this picture. Khatari Gaulden, along with Ernest Mudd Graham, helped promote Black August to honor the death of George Jackson and other BGF. Khatari died in August 1978 as a result of a head injury suffered during a football game that took place on San Quentin's Adjustment Center yard. According to BGF, he was denied appropriate medical attention, and they swore death for his revenge. That concludes part 1, most influential people in the history of the Black Guerrilla Family. Part 2 will follow soon on this channel. Thanks for watching.